everybody to the Coaches in the Mouth. Coach Jeff Williams here, along with the Mouth, Brent Bender, and Coach Bray Cook. Got Kyle Sutherland here from Scorebook Live. Let's start breaking down some classifications and some fun stuff, a little preseason here. Let's get into 2A. We've talked to a lot of 2A coaches. What do y'all have as far as what you look at your top? I know you're going to release it soon, but 2A looks very, very competitive with some surprising teams. We've Cross County's looks like they got a few transfers.
Yeah, Cross County out of nowhere, pretty much. Yeah, them and of course you also got to look at the top of the defending state champions, Hazen, and the defending runner-up Carlisle, which I think is going to be probably pretty good again. But the teams that last year, were not didn't make deep playoff runs, Cross County being one, and also Mineral Springs. I really like what Coach Hathcock has done at Mineral Springs. When I saw what he did at Lafayette County and taking a team that I think they had went winless the year before and then went and won a playoff game. He essentially did the same thing with Mineral Springs last year in his first season. They were winless in 2021 and then won 7 games last year. Didn't win a playoff game. I think they actually lost to Carlisle in the first round. But they've got a lot of dudes back. They're at running back and receiver, tight end, all that, and, of course, on defense. So I think Mineral Springs is definitely going to continue to take that next step forward just in the second year. But I love EPC, and you can't talk about 2A contenders without talking about East Poinsett County because they've got Dennis Gaines, who, according to all stats recorded, finished top 5 nationally with over 3,200 yards.
Wow.
So, and also led get this, rushed for over 3,000 yards and also led the team with 120-plus tackles. So that's a football player right there. And as to quote Houston Nutt, that's a football player, just being able – that's why you love those 2A teams, those small schools, because you've got guys like that just get it done on every phase of the game.
Well, and we're going to bring on Paul Ernest here from Darkshire in a minute. And one thing, it's a big deal. People understand, they play a lot longer than, a week longer than 6A, 7A, and 5A. Of course, your numbers are smaller, and just keeping people healthy and it's such a, it's, every coach is going to say, we got to be injury free and all that good stuff. But
in 2A, that's
2A, oh man, you lose 1 or 2 guys, and it could be tough on you. Let's talk a little bit, get into it a little bit. Is Hazen defending state champions? They're returning a lot of guys. Feel like they've got a really good shot. Carlisle lost a few.
Running back was the biggest one. They
one.
got a good bit of linemen coming back, but losing Jason Sullivan, a 4-year starter, that's big time.
And they're in the same conference, so. Yeah. How does that play out? What do you think?
Well, last year, the Week 10 game, that was one of the premier games of the week, with them. And then, of course, Arkadelphia Mauer had a lot of of course, that was the weather weekend that everything got pushed back. It had a lot of great matchups. And with Carlisle, I think that's probably going to be, I think them losing Jason Sullivan, as great of a player as Luke King was, I do feel like that might be a little bit more harmful or hurtful for them than Hazen losing Luke King. But because I just feel like that Hazen's probably got the edge, though, on the skill players and all that stuff. But they both got really great offensive and defensive linemen. So I do think that conference is probably going to come down to those 2 teams again, and definitely are going to be 2 contenders. But I think that there could also be some new ones in the mix, like that are going to take that next step, like your Mineral Springs and possibly Cross County.
Well, let's just go back to Mineral Springs. You hit on them earlier, and we're fixing to bring Coach Paul Ernest on from Dirks, and he was really talking about they've got a lot of great players, and he felt like that league. If you could just get in, you're going to get a chance to win a playoff game and make a run. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and bring on Coach Paul Ernest from Dirks. Coach, we've been sitting around talking about a little bit 2A football. Talk to us a little bit. A little 3-part question. Talk to us. I know you haven't been there real long. Talk to us about your team real briefly, and then we'll get into it and talk about your conference and then overall in the state. So go ahead and talk to us about your team.
Yeah, well, the Dirks Outlaws are the 3-time defending district champion of 7-2A. We had a little shake-up last year. I think we had one coach that was at the school that he was at before that wasn't new to the conference. So a bunch of people just kind of rotated around. Conference got better. Mount Ida joined, Poen joined, and Mineral Springs has a phenomenal group of young athletes. I believe they're going to be juniors this year. They're loaded, and they keep getting kids moving in with the facility upgrades they're getting. Got a starting tailback out of Nashville going there, so to go, kids already had, they're loaded. Of course, Mike White to me is one of the best small school coaches since Frank McClellan. He just gets after you in the split back veer, does things that kids don't like to see these days. So our conference, I believe, is one of the top conferences in the state. I'd like to think that we're going to be right in the middle of it this year again. We returned some good football players, Eric Derricks, and returned all of our offensive linemen. Got a new quarterback. We're trying to figure out which one it's going to be, but he's going to be new one way or the other. Andrew Mack is a three-time All-State basketball player who's decided to play football this year, and he can kind of throw it a little bit, I guess. He's pretty good. And then we got two freshmen that moved up that we're going to find a quarterback from one of them. So I'm pretty excited about the year. I'm not real excited about the row of conference games we got to play with Mineral Springs, Mount Ida, and Poen, but I guess everybody's got to do that when your conference is good.
You look at last year's, crazy year. Of course, I was part of the first kindergarten class ever at Carlisle, Arkansas, by the way. So I'm real proud of that. Them and Hazen go to the finals last year and hate each other. There's no love lost, which is, and I, look at Carlisle, their coach left, and I believe they lost a lot of guys. And of course, Hazen, they've been a power for years. And plus your conference is done well in the playoffs. So, and there's a lot of different parts, and people don't realize in your league, people always talk about staying healthy, but if you lose a guy, it's like losing two guys or sometimes three because they're offense, defense, and kick game. Talk to us a little bit overall state-wise where you think y'all kind of should wind up in and the overall, who are some of the teams we all be looking out for?
Well, I think it's all pretty much the usual suspects. I think a surprise, a dark horse, really has a chance to beat Mineral Springs out of our conference. They've got a kid, Javion Fricks. He's a man child. He's being recruited by UNLV, I believe, and the University of Arkansas. He showed out in some stuff up there. When I left over there, he was about 6'5", 240, and could run. And I think he's put on a little bit of muscle, and I think he's grown a couple inches. So he's a dude. I expect them to make a push at it, to be honest. And then Hazen, I'll tell you what, Hazen, that tailback they have, he's the real deal. I got a chance to coach Luke King in an all-star game, the quarterback that graduated from there. I don't know any program recovers from losing a kid of that character. I don't care how much football he can play. That is a A-plus kid. And if they've got more of those there, I think Hazen's going to be right there in the mix again. Carlisle, you can't count them out year in and year out. Seems like every now and then they'll have a down year kind of thrown right in the middle of it. But I don't expect that to be this year. I think they got a taste in their mouth and they're hungry. East Poinsett County, they always loaded with athletes. And then, again, out of our conference, split back veer, Michael White, here he comes, whether you like it or not.
He's won a few games over there doing that.
He's won a few. And I tell you, you put that film in and you can play with them most times for about a quarter and a half. But if that's not what you like to do, about that second half, that 3 yards turns into about 12 a pop. And I think Carlisle does that to you a little bit too. So 2A football, like you said, it's about staying healthy, and it's about finding that mix of kids that keep your numbers up, because if you only play 11, 12, 13 kids because you're playing everybody both ways, you only have 15. A lot of those kids are going to go to baseball or basketball and not come out. So, it's a matter of finding a way to get those kids some playing time, staying healthy with your playmakers, and then getting everybody involved. But statewide, I think it's pretty wide open. I think there's some really good football teams and some really good football players in 2A.
Well, and that's what we've been sitting here discussing, and like I said, Coach, we're gonna get you off here. We appreciate you coming on. Hey, good luck this season. We'll have you on again during the season. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff. Go Outlaws.
Well, that was very interesting with Coach Ernest, and he talked about who he was at Mineral Springs and's gone to Turks, and has talked about how tough that league is. Talked about his team and feels like they're going to be in the mix. So, talk to me about that conference, and I don't know if you got it off the top of your head here. what's a matchup? What some games we need to be paying attention in that conference.
Well, and that's the thing too with Poen. That's another school that I think that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. A couple of years ago they went to the quarterfinals, then went to the semifinals, and that's not a school that has had a long standing football tradition. I mean, really, before Coach Barrett and his staff, Keith and all them, and his brother, they really didn't have any kind of history because I think it was 2010, 2011. So you always like that matchup. Now, definitely Dirks and Mount Ida. That's obviously a really good one as well. I'm really interested to see, Brad Chesser. I've got a long history with him playing against him. He's at Murfreesboro now. Was at DeQueen and then came to Murfreesboro last year. He got a few players on there, so kind of interested to see, if can they make a little bit of improvement. But I think really what it boils down to in that conference certainly is definitely all about Mount Ida and Dirks at the top there, and I think you always got to put Poe in there as a wild card.
Well, and Mount Ida, they've been dominant in that league. I mean, they're playing on Thanksgiving. They're playing, in December every year, and that's an amazing little community to me. I mean, I go through there, going to Hot Springs a lot, and it's just actually done a walk through there, going to Lake Hamilton for just amazing community. And boy, they love their football there.
That's right. In terms of the beauty, and I know it's very convenient for me to say this up here, but you're not going to beat Northwest Arkansas and just the atmosphere, but Hot Springs, that whole area down there in southwest part of the state is just beautiful. I'm kind of from around, my family's from around there a little bit, but Mount Ida, beautiful area there.
Well, let's talk. Let's go up to Cross County a little bit. We talked about this. And he's got a young offensive line that I think he's 6'4", around that part. Big couple of transfers in from when they've kind of been the summer story this year with those kids.
Yeah, and that makes the 2A2 even more interesting. Talking about East Poinsett County, then you've got Mark Tree, who's always got athletes. Earl, that just makes it even more competitive. I would say 2A2 and 2A3 or 2A4, with Carlisle and Hazen. Those likely, arguably were the two toughest conferences out of the four in the 2A class. So definitely just makes it even that much tougher because last year that's who we were talking about. We were talking about the Mark Trees and then Earls at some point, and of course East Poinsett County that made a semifinal playoff run. So just makes it even deeper.
Well, that Cross County EPC game, and Mark Tree's another one. Yeah. And they're always in the mix also. So 2A looks like it's going to be very competitive, different parts of the state. Yeah. And, another part that people don't understand is the travel they have in the playoffs.
That's it. And, it's down to 4 classes now. 8-man football has, of course, had a lot to do with that. But, it is crazy. And speaking of 8-man, some of those, you've got teams like Subiaco Academy that are having to go to now Corning and Genoa Central down in the deep southwest part of the state. So, it's a lot of traveling. I think that conference we were just talking about in the 2 region, the Region 2, that one's probably the most, like the one that's probably the easiest, I would say, just because you're up in that northeast part of the state. But it definitely makes for some brutal road trips. I traveled from central Arkansas to Mena and then to Ashdown to Queen. Those are some hikes, and it definitely takes a toll, and it certainly gives a lot of advantage to the home teams.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Let's make a little transition here. Let's go to 3A, which I think, looking on paper, could be one of the most competitive classifications we have in the state. We talked to a couple of coaches we're going to bring on here in a few minutes, but let's talk in 3A. You start with, get over there with Charleston and Booneville. Those guys have been dominant.
Yeah.
And talk to me a little bit about the defending champions, Charleston and Booneville.
Well, especially before Harding Academy moved up to 4A, I felt like across the board, this might be the deepest club. When you think about starting at the top with the Harding Academies, the Boonevilles, the Charlestons, Prescott, Hoxie, McGee before McGee moved up. It was just, there were so many matchups in the playoffs that even when you got down to the first or second round, there were a lot of quality ones, whereas other classes you got to wait till maybe the quarters before you see something like that. So Booneville, I think definitely, Charleston, they're certainly going to be the defending champions. They just lost so much. But Ricky May, he knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And great coach, one of the best dudes you'll ever meet. And, losing to Brandon Scott, who was our overall male athlete of the year between basketball. I think he did basketball, football, 3-time All-State, in basketball and football, and it was also all-state in track and I believe weightlifting and also golf. Golf for the first time, at least on a competitive team, for his senior year. So definitely a lot of losses. Now, with Boonville, you do lose a good bit, but you also got Dax Goff, one of the state's top running backs and linebackers, coming back. You also have Ryland Ray, which I always say, where there's a Boonville, there's a Ray,
yes,
dating back to his grandfather and Gator Ray and his brother Randon, all those guys, and some cousins as well. So he's back after, I think he got injured in either the benefit game or week 1 or something like that last year. But they definitely got a lot. So it definitely starts up there with those two. But, I certainly think that it's still very deep without Harding Academy and all that. But what is, like, looking at the screen here, Center Point, they were a really good rushing team last year. What are they going to do without Jace Clark? I mean, that's kind of the questions. I think the biggest one that I have is Fordyce.
Yeah,
back-to-back state champions a couple of years ago, went to the state championship and lost to McCrory. And so they were in the mix. I mean, they were pretty much the kings of Class 2A. Took a little bit of a step back, and that's a team that I know, I mean, anybody does anytime you're overlooked, but they thrive when they're overlooked like that. And I think that that's going to be a team that makes a whole lot of improvement from last season. Camden Harmony Grove is one we talked about earlier with Caleb Johnson. I think that's going to be one to really watch. So it really does. I mean, to me, it starts with the teams that, like Melbourne, probably going to be pretty good again, but lost
Stu,
a lot.
What an amazing job. And I saw Stu this past weekend, and I got to talk to him after the season. I didn't realize he was there until halfway through the season. You look up, and they're undefeated.
Batesville for like 30 years.
Oh, for Batesville, 30 years. And the thing about his career, and he'd be a great podcast, is that guy's won state championships in track, great baseball coach, a defense coordinator. Whatever Stu Smith touches, it's going to be successful.
Right.
And I didn't realize he was there until about week 7, and I was like, Melbourne's rolling and put 2 and 2 together.
I think that's one. I mean, not to say that they weren't going to be any good, but I don't think that people saw that coming. Just to get to that point and to go on that undefeated run for so long, and they lost by a point? I think. So. It was definitely a really, that was one that people this time last year certainly weren't talking about. But, I think it's definitely going to still continue to be. But I really do. I'm looking at Fordyce kind of as, the dark horse there, because coming in last year, moving up a classification, you had a feeling that probably weren't going to get back to the state finals. It wasn't going to get there. But I really do believe that that's Coach Rogers, again, multi-time state champion. Yes. So, and they're always breeding athletes down there. So I think that they're going to be just fine.
The Redbugs are always going to be in the mix.
They've been doing it for 100 years.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's do this. We're going to go over to Northeast Arkansas right now, and let's bring in Coach Tom Sears. Coach, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Well, great. So you're 26. You've been at Hoxie. You've been there a while. You've been pretty much dominated, especially in that area of the state and your conference. Been there close quarterfinals. Talk to us about your team you got coming back this coming year.
Yeah, we feel really good about this bunch we have coming back. They were the conference champions as ninth graders, but we all know how that changes. But they're a very confident bunch, and they've worked extremely hard through the years for us, and they've been very instrumental in the success we've had the last couple of years. Really tough to come in. We lost 20 seniors last year. Had a really big group that stayed together, the biggest group we ever had, and they did things right. They came in just like the crew we had before us, the classes we had that had some really good seasons, and they even took it up a notch. And man, you want things to happen for people that do stuff the right way, and man, they did, and it just didn't work out for us last year. We got knocked out early, but these kids are really hungry to come back and to move farther than we have.
Well, let's go into your league a little bit. I mean, y'all have really dominated that league, for over the last several years. And talk to us about your league and how that gets you prepared for the playoffs and just how competitive your league is.
It's extremely competitive. And a lot of people, I kind of think we're kind of up here, kind of out of a lot of the media down in the central part of the state. And, we got OCL that's in there. They're a juggernaut every year. Those guys, they do a fantastic job over there, and they got a lot of really good skill guys. So we always battle it out, whether it's for the championship or whether it's just a very good Friday night football game. We've gotten to where we play each other really well. So that's always a really good game. And then guys, there is fantastic coaches in this conference. I mean, we've got Farrell Shelton's is a Hall of Famer in Missouri. Don Simmons is a Hall of Famer in Kansas. Terry Farmer's coached who knows how many games, won a lot of ball games. And then Jamie Carter's an Alabama football player. Jeff Blake played at Arkansas State. And then Ben Fisher has moved over to Manila from Blauville and did a great job there. So it's tough. They're very, our conference got kids that are very, very well coached, may not be as skilled as some of the other conferences throughout the state, but they are schematically wise and prepared. They're as good as any.
Well, talk to me about this because, I've lived on the western part of the state probably the last 18 years. Of course, I see Booneville, Charleston, over, and they're always in the mix. Of course, Harding Academy was there for years. Of course, they've moved up all the way to 4A. Talk to us just real quick on, where you see the Mustangs, sitting there in the overall in the state, and how do you prepare your team as far as, because what Booneville's got over there and Charleston's got over there. I mean, you just mentioned Osceola. They've had a great, great athletes, and you've got great coaching in that conference. Talk to me where you think y'all fit in overall in the state.
I think we got a chance to be right there in the mix. If we lost all of our linemen, we've been known here for a long time of having the linemen year after year, and we lost them all last year. So we're replacing all of them with juniors this year, but we've got all our skill guys back. So it's a little flip of the scenario for us, and actually it's kind of nice. I mean, it's to have all those skill guys back, and the guys that we're plugging in there on the offensive line done a fantastic job through spring and the summer. So we feel really good. Now, there's some very good football teams throughout the state in 3A, and we've been fortunate enough to play Booneville a couple times, in the second round and stuff, and we've actually went over there and beat them one time. So went down to Prescott, and those, we got to hand it to us down there, but we got to see what that level is, and that's where we want to be. We want to be considered right there in the mix of the top teams in the 3A, within the top 10. That's our goal. And then we feel like anybody in that top 10's got a chance. You get in the playoffs, you get in the second, third round, you got a chance to win it. We haven't done that here. We haven't made the championship game, and we want that to happen. So.
I understand that, and people don't understand, once you get in the playoffs, injuries and just things can come up, but a lot of times you get to state finals, you look up and go, how'd these two get here? But just the way things are, and a lot of it's just time people want to practice. Well, Coach, we appreciate you having it on. Good luck to you this year. We'll be following the Mustangs. We'll have you on again later on this season. Thanks for stopping by.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. Think about he's been there, 20 some odd years. It's just been an established program. You just heard him and what they got come back. They got a good player. Where do you see them in the mix?
That's the thing is with them, Glen. I think that's why, kind of back to my original point, that 3A has been so deep is because these teams consistently. Every classification you'll have that surprise one or two teams every single year. Like last year with Melbourne being that. But it's like just the same ones with Hoxie, Glen Rose, all those teams that I mentioned earlier. And, of course, now with Harding Academy and McGee and 4A. But that's just what Coach Sears has done is, it's one of those things to where, like, when you have a coach that's that consistent, I would rather – I know that, again, I talked about earlier that they hadn't won a state championship, but they're always in that mix. And that's really what it's about. As long as you have a coach that is – it's not like, you have a 3-7 season and then you have a really good year or maybe 2 years and then drop off. You don't see that with a Tom Sears coach team, really. And so that's just the thing is just keeping up that consistency like he has and, really enjoy. I only talked to him a couple of times, but, always enjoyable to pick his brain and kind of see what's he's thinking, but just kept a consistent playoff contender for years and years.
And he stayed there and been dominant. Let's do this. Let's go to a rookie head coach here, Coach Keener from Glen Rose. Let's hear what he has to say, and then we'll see what your response is. Coach, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, Coach. You're going in. You're taking over, first year head coach, and a tough league, tough division. I mean, you look at the teams in 3A and for all across the state. We've talked to Tom Sears from Hoxley. We're going to talk to Ricky May from Charleston and know what Boonville's got. Also, Prescott, the Curly Wolves have been dominant. Talk to us a little bit about your team first, and then we'll get into your conference play.
Yes, sir. We should have a pretty decent group coming back this year. We fortunate enough to have 8 and 9 guys back on both sides of the football. So that's huge for us going into this year. Probably 5 or 6 of them that are going to be 3-year starters for me. So that's really thankful. Looking forward to that. Guys that have been through the grit, guys that have been deep in the playoffs the last 2 years. Actually got 3 or 4 of them that moved up and played as 9th graders. So that's going to be really huge going into this season for us. We'll find out early. We try to schedule a pretty tough non-conference to get us into conference play, to get us ready for all those cats you were just talking about. So we'll find out early where we're at, and hopefully we can get out of that SEC East Conference, West Conference healthy and get into conference play and see what we can do.
Well, let's get into your conference. I mean, in Glen Rose, y'all been. It's not like people don't know who you are. Y'all have won state championships. You've been in the state finals. You've had good runs in the playoffs. Talk to us about your conference. I mean, it's a rough and tough league, and a lot of times guys that can get out there, they make a run just getting in. And talk to us about the difficulty of your conference and how you think y'all stack up this year in your conference.
Our conference is, for the most part, in 3A, probably one of the toughest ones. Our top four usually go at a minimum 2 rounds. I think this past year the 4th was Center Point, and they ended up going 3 rounds. Ended up getting beat by the state champion in Charleston. But you got Center Point, you got Coach Keithley at Bismarck that's done a heck of a job for the last 6-7 years now. He's got his 2 kids, his 2 boys that are coming up that'll be in high school now, and they're 2 really good hands. We got Magnet Cove, who's right up there in the mix, and then Jessieville in any given year can be right up there as well. So those top 4 right there are pretty tough in general, and usually, like I said, our top 4 go a couple rounds, and they're tough for anybody else across the state to see when they come out of our conference. So looking forward, hopefully we got the top last year. Go ahead, sorry.
Conference. Yeah, it's been a pretty, y'all's conference has gone a long ways in the state playoffs. Talk to me a little bit about this. Sorry to interrupt you, but talk to us a little bit about this. Where do you think your bunch is in the state? It's early on. Everybody's, got their top 5s out and all that kind of stuff. And obviously in any league, injuries and the way things happen and those circumstances. Talk to me where you think Glen Rose is statewide. I mean, you're in a league. If you get in, I remember when I was coaching in a league, if you got in, you had a chance to win a state championship. You just had to get in. And y'all's league's real similar. Talk to me where you think your bunch is as far as overall with the Prescotts, the Boonvilles, the Charlestons, those guys, the Hoxies. Where do y'all fit in this bunch?
I think we're right in the mix with all of them this year with this group. High hopes and high intentions for them. We don't shy away from that one bit. We talked about it since we hung them up in December this past year. Anything of shy of playing in Little Rock is coming up short for this group this year. And they're just, we're that confident in what we're trying to do. Like you said, coming out of the conference, getting to the playoffs, you roll the dice and see what happens, with injuries and things like that. Fingers crossed, but we hold our hats up there with everybody you just spoke about, and we don't shy away from that. We want to play one more. We want to get to Little Rock, and that's the goal. An undefeated conference championship. That's not what we're trying to do. And I think the kids have bought in. We've had a heck of an off season, heck of a summer so far. Attendance rate's been 98%, and we're excited about it. So,
well, good deal, Coach. appreciate you coming on. We're going to have you on this season. Look forward to watching your team play, and good luck to you, and look forward to talking to you down the road. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Well, we just heard Coach Keener. I mean, got a couple of good football players. He's taken over from his dad. He understands that place. Where do you see? He feels like they're in the mix.
Well, and he's right. And here's the thing about Stephen Keener. I've never seen, and I don't know him super well. We've talked on the phone a couple times. I've never seen Stephen Keener do something that he didn't thrive at, whether it's as a player, whether that's as an offensive coordinator, and he's taken over at a really good time. You know, they've got a lot of dudes coming back, and that's just another one. Like I was saying, you know, consistently, you always, it's like anytime you're talking about 3A, you pencil in Boonville, you pencil in Charleston, but you know, Mark Keener's, I mean, even back to when he worked for Billy Elmore, which y'all had a great interview. I've interviewed him on my podcast, one of the best to talk to, and just extremely detailed, wise answers. And when he was Billy's defensive coordinator, I mean, what they did, turning that program around, and then what he sustained, I don't think that Stephen's going to miss a beat, and I truly mean that.
Well, and I do too, and they've got a great tradition there in a you know, communities like that, they just love their school, and
Absolutely.
they love their teams and that part of it. Well, let's move over to equipment. We're going to bring in Coach DJ Mars, head coach at Quitman. Coach Mars, to do this, let's get into this pretty quick. We're sitting around discussing, you know, the 3A classification, a little bit about your conference and your team. Talk to us a little bit about where you think your team is and what you see coming in for this coming up year.
We're replacing a lot of starters, a really young team, big sophomore class. We return a lot of our guys up front. You know, that's kind of what we're hanging our hat on is we've got three-year starters and some big boys up front that have led us the past couple years. So probably a little bit more on the ground than we have been in the past with some younger skill guys. But, you know, just jumping up to 3A last year, it's a different ball game. And, you know, you have a weakness or you have a hole somewhere. These teams find it now, and especially in the conference that we're in. So, you know, it's going to be a year for us to play a lot of young guys and a lot of new names that we've relied on the playmakers in the past. Those guys are gone, and you know, like I said, most of our skill guys, except for Grayson Ely, it'll be a bunch of new names out there.
Talk to us about this. You made the jump last year, and you know, anytime you jump classifications, and I've hadn't done a lot, but just watching, you know, when you go up in classifications, you know, when you go up, there's more coaches on the other staff. There's, you know, just more people in that part of it. And y'all growing, and y'all have done a phenomenal job. I drive by there every year going to the lake and check out y'all's facilities. It's unbelievable what you've done with the stadium and everything there. Talk to us about your conference and where you think y'all fall in the conference, where your conference falls in overall statewide.
Yeah, see, I thought last year our conference was one of the, and it even showed that once we got to the playoffs, was one of the tougher conferences. But everybody in our conference is just about in the same boat. I think Melbourne had 15, 16 seniors, 24. We had 15. You know, so a lot of people lost a lot. Perryville graduated their, you know, 4-year starter at quarterback and some key guys. So pretty much everybody but Salem. Salem returns quite a bit. They return their whole backfield and move up probably one of the most talented junior high classes that I've ever coached against, really big physical guys. So I look for them to probably be at the top, just returning the Romine kid at running back and their quarterback and some big playmakers. And Newport, they'll always be there just with their tradition. And Coach Ridd's done a really good job there. Just he's from there. That's where he played. So he understands and gets it. They'll play a lot of young guys and be really good. But for the most part, like I said, it'll be a really young conference with, you know, the top teams really graduating a lot last year.
Well, it is, and then you start looking. We've talked to, you know, a couple of guys. We talked to Coach Sears from Hoxie. We're going to talk to some other guys. Is you know Charleston, Boonville, you know, those guys. You know, they're always in the mix also, and just all the way through the state. Where do you think, if you were looking at it and, you know, you weren't coaching equipment, just looking at it, where do you think the top teams in 3A, and where do you maybe see everything lining out at the end a little bit?
Well, I think those two that you talked about, they've got to always be in the conversation. I think Fordyce is very, very talented. We've seen them a couple times this summer. Just again with their tradition, and Coach Rogers always has those guys ready to play in November to get to December. They're going to be really tough. And then I think you're crazy if you don't mention the Prescott Curley will and Coach Glass down there.
Does a great job, doesn't he?
And he's got one or two that are pretty decent at football, so they'll find a way to scratch in, I'm sure, and be there late in the year in December as well.
Curly has always got a great tradition. They're always there. Well, Coach, we appreciate you coming on. Hey, we're going to have you on this year during this season. Hey, good luck to you guys, and good luck to you the rest of the season.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
See you, DJ. Coach, we just heard from Coach Mars there from Quitman, who's done an outstanding job, not just with the football program, but overall athletically in the facilities. I always drive by there going to the lake, and they're building something new over there all the time. And and DJ's done a great job over there. Let's talk a little bit about that conference, a little bit about that football team.
Yeah, absolutely. Quitman, I grew up, I'm from Sherwood, but my parents have a house at Greer's Ferry, so I went through Quitman many times, another just small drive-through town type deal. I drove through there fast enough one time that I got a pretty hefty ticket. That's another story for another day. But, that's DJ, like you said, he's done a great job there. Still a pretty new program. I remember when I first heard my mom telling me that they were getting a football program. We got a lot of friends from that area, and I can tell you, that one thing I love about DJ, he's not afraid to speak his mind.
No, he is
not at all. And I can tell you that the people at Quitman really do like him a lot. Again, we do have friends there and speak very highly of him. But that's the thing is, I love you guys recently had Eli Drinkwitz on. Mm-hmm. And I love listening to interviews with him and just hearing, he's such a smart guy, football-wise and just in life. But he's one of those that, again, is not afraid to say what he wants to say. And that's what DJ is. But you know what? He backs it up, too. You look at what he's done at Quitman, and that job is not for the faint of heart, not necessarily because the fan base is so hard to deal with or anything. But, again, just because it's a fairly new program. And, I mean, you're not really in an ideal area. It's a beautiful little town and everything, but you're not necessarily in an ideal area, and he still keeps them as contenders on a yearly basis. I mean, you look at that's a tough conference, Salem and Newport and all those. I mean, that's going to be – I know that just about – I think almost every team from that conference, whether they've done really well or not, I think we've featured, somebody from just about every team in that conference. And I think it's definitely probably going to be against Salem and Newport and Quitman in the mix.
All right, Mouth. Let's get into this 3A. Who do you like? That's the main thing. I mean, there's a bunch of quality teams out there, but who do you like?
Man, you just gotta keep thinking Charleston, till somebody proves it. To me, they're the gold standard.
Well, and the people down at Boonville don't believe that. And I'm going to tell you, you get those two together. And the rivals in 3A are just unbelievable. I mean, Boonville, I watched a playoff game, those guys, and it's just a war.
The regular season game, it was unfortunate, and this just made Boonville people sick. Boonville had about 6 or 7 guys that were they had an incident. That's right.
That's right.
And they didn't have 6 so that's kind of what the Boonville faithful are saying. Like, look, you can brag about this win, but we didn't have all of our guys and all that stuff. And it's definitely, it's personal there. It's kind of like some of the rivalries up here with, Springdale, Fayetteville, that history and everything. So it's definitely that area is very prideful, and they've got a lot of rich football history between those two schools.
Hey, I'm looking forward to when we break out the schedule and you say, here's who you're going to go see in Class 3A. I'm going to say, let's make sure the Hogs are out of town. Because I'd probably rather go to the 3A game than the Hog game, but got way too much money invested in tickets.
Well, that's good. Well, that's a very interesting outtake, and I'm really looking forward to the 2A, 3. For some reason, the 3A just on paper just looks like
it's every year, Jeff.
Yeah,
it's 3A football, and I cover softball for us. I'm a lead content writer for that, and I love the game of softball a lot, and it's like 3A is incredibly deep there, and that's what I tell people all the time. Is like those are the two sports that I think that is just like from top to bottom. Now, I'm not saying the best in 3A could beat the best in 7A, but just in terms of classification and just how deep it is, I think that's pretty much year in and year out the class that you point to.
Well, I appreciate you coming on for the 2A, 3A segment, and really looking forward to this season. I think there's going to be some outstanding games, but we're talking about cross county, and that's what makes the summer fun. Where you find teams, you hear a few things, and see how it works out. But
and another thing about three, you get one dominant transfer in to a team, or two transfers that are war daddies. You've gone from the have-nots to the haves in about 22 seconds.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
It does. Well, Kyle, thank you for coming on. We're going to hit a little 4A, 5A on the next segment. Hey, appreciate you. Everybody, make sure you like and subscribe. Bray, give us our rundown on how to find us.
Yep. Find us on Twitter. The Coaches Pod is our handle. Also on Instagram. YouTube is really our home base. Coaches in the Mouth Pod. Search that. You'll find us. Like, subscribe, and here pretty soon we'll be on the old Apple Podcast.
Well, that sounds Apple Podcast.
Apple Podcast. That sounds real, doesn't it?
Well, tune in next time. We're going to hit the 4A, 5A, and Kyle, appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening.
Oh.